So welcome everyone. I'm very happy to be welcoming you to this session on young people as expert by experience and participatory research, policy and service development. This event is organized by the DIPA Center and Human Rights City and is part of the Bergen Exchange 2021. My name is Lucie Ducard. I am a PhD candidate at the Faculty of Law here in Bergen, and I will be the moderator of this session. We are very lucky to have several talented speakers for this event, and I will now briefly introduce them. So first we have Stefan Schneur, who is professor at the Institute for Study in Children's Services at the University of Applied Science and Art, Northwestern Switzerland. We have Vibeke and Anna Moller, respectively Director and Chief Consultant at the Social Development Center, or SUS, in Denmark. We have Louis Zetland, who is expert by experience and work as consultant for the UT-Kontakten service at Bergen Kommune. And joining us online, we have experts from Frederiksfabrikken, Leon and Matilda. I hope they are connected. Yes, they're here. So they're expert by experience, Frederiksfabrikken or the Change Factory. So as we see, we have many diverse and exciting panel, and I would like to thank all of you for being with us today. Regarding the session, it will be structured as follows. First, we will have presentation from our different speakers, and then we will have around 30 minutes for panel discussion and Q&A. For people who are following us on Zoom, you can use the Q&A boxes to ask your question. And please note that, unfortunately, Luis will have to leave us early. So if we have time, we will try to squeeze in some question. Otherwise, you can also address your question to the DIPA Center, and we will try to forward them to her. So that's it for me, and I now leave you with Stefan for the first presentation.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you for giving me the opportunity to introduce here into the case of participatory research. So what is participatory research? It is certainly not a research method, it's a research style or an orientation to inquiry. And it is also not a concise or clear-cut concept of research. It is an umbrella term for varying sorts of designs of doing research, and with also different underlying assumptions and intentions. But there is one distinctive feature of participatory research which I would like to highlight, and that is in the composition of the persons who are doing research together in a research project. There are, on the one hand, scholars or scientists, people who have a formal role in the scientific system. And on the one hand, you have people who have not such a formal role in the scientific system, and also typically have no specific qualification in doing research. But these people work together, cooperate in the process, directed to bring about new knowledge. The latter group, for the latter group, there are also different terms in the discourse. None of this is, from my perspective, quite convincing or satisfying. Sometimes they are termed experts by experience, sometimes co-researchers. For this presentation, I will stick to the quite simple notion of external researchers. So there are, in principle, can be two areas of involvement or participation for those external researchers. On the one hand, we have the operative procedures or activities in a research process. So the work that has to be done, like collecting data, evaluating data, communicating the findings, and so on. And the other area of participation might be the decisions, which are relevant in a research project. And as you all may know by own experience, there are lots of decisions to make when it comes to research. So the first and perhaps mostly relevant decision is on the topic of research, on the research questions. Then it goes to the selection of the appropriate research methods, the way the access to the field can be done, the selection of research sites, and a lot of decisions also apply to the allocation, organization, evaluation of data, and the communication of findings. And also you have to decide on what I call here the rhetorics of relevance. So how you explain the relevance of your research to different audiences. And when it comes to social research or research in the field of social work or social services, you may also draw consequences from your results and make recommendations for the further development of service structures and so on. So let us look in the next 2 slides to the justifications and potentials of participatory research. If you look at the question, who may have the decision-making powers on research, especially on what becomes a topic of research. So this is quite an unilateral thing. It is to a great extent reserved to scholars and scientists, to governments who commission a lot of research in the social field, to the research funding institutions, mostly the public research funding institutions, and to foundations who fund research. I exclude here for the whole presentation the case of private financed research by enterprises and so on. So I will not look at this. And of course, decisions on what comes under research is to a great extent also influenced then by the political agendas of governments, by the disciplinary discourses, and also by the strategies of individual universities, faculties, research units, and so on. So research is quite an exclusive endeavor, if you look at it this way. And the great majority of citizens is excluded from these decisions. And so are excluded also are a great number, a great variety of views to the world, of concerns, and of interests towards research, all these which are under the attention of governments, researchers, scholars, funding institutions, and so on. And this, you could argue, contributes to the decoupling of the science system from the society. And when it comes to social research, this can be viewed as even more problematic because it reproduces social inequalities and extends social inequalities to the field of knowledge production. And from this argumentation raises the question, is this fair? And is this also coherent with basic normative principles of democracy? And you could build justifications and rationales for participatory research from these considerations. But you could also build these from considerations on the potentials of participatory research. One could argue that participatory research might be a counter strategy to the decoupling of the science system from large parts of the society. it could also provide opportunities to make a better account also for the political dimensions of research, especially social research. And it might open research to a wider spectrum also of lived experiences also of marginalized groups or of groups of people who are who have structurally limited powers, like, for example, children. And you might extend research to issues which are not under the attention of the disciplinary discourses in their mainstreams, at least at a given historical point. By opening research to non-researchers, you might also gain an enrichment in terms of the topics of research, the perspectives of research, and the types of data. And on the other hand, it might contribute to a better recognition of these lives, groups, marginalized groups, etc., and perhaps also to an empowerment of these groups through the participation in a research project. So this might lead also, or they might give a contribution to the democratization of knowledge production, and have an impact on the extension of democratic principles to research and the research process. So this might be a bit an abstract or perhaps far-reaching perspective. If I now look at an example of participatory research, which has been called Care Leavers Researching Leaving Care, and it has been conducted in my institute very recently. 15 care leavers, 3 scholars, worked together over 3 years. And the core research questions in this project have been: how do care leavers experience the process of leaving care? What do they experience as the main challenges in this project? How do they experience a given range of available services for their needs in this phase? What is the relevance of informal networks for them? What are, from their perspective, the needs for an optimization of social services from the perspective of care leavers? And these care leavers participated in the designing as well as the conducting of interviews and data evaluation. And they participated also in the writing of the report and including the recommendations to the political field and in the communication of findings. The impact so far has been a research report, a guidebook for care leavers with very life practical questions answered. Also the building of a regional network for care leavers, a raised attention and wider, better recognition of these challenges of leaving care with the relevant actors in the social administration and social services. And there may be further impacts in the future. So there is a potential, but in participatory research, but this comes not without challenges. And I want to give us a brief look at the special challenges you might have when you are practicing participatory research. It starts with the access to the marginalized groups, the winning of their trust, and the winning of their willingness to cooperate and participate in quite unfamiliar activities for a long period of time. So another challenge might be to develop in interactive workshops or whatever format you use, the research skills with the participants, the external researchers. You must be quite stable in the tasks of making explicit what research is and means, and how this is be done. And all these forms of deliberation under the condition of an asymmetric distribution of knowledge on research. You must have advanced social skills as well, skills who researchers often may not have. And because this is not a part of the curriculum, you have to handle an increased complexity in a research team. There are extra demands in terms of project management. You must have capacities to cope also with an emotional involvement of the external researchers with respect of the topic on the research, because it touches their lives, and this is something different. Also from this, you need an extra sensitivity for diverse vulnerabilities and also for very fine power relations in the groups. You need advanced competencies to reflect on ethical dilemmas and a considerable amount of flexibility from all or for all participants. So my concluding remarks, should all research from now on be participatory research? No. Is participatory research the new one best way in social services? Also, no. Should participatory research as a style of research with specific potentials be taken into account more often? I would say yes. Should it be practiced and further developed? I also would say yes. And should experiences with participatory research and familiar approaches be more often shared and debated? I would also say yes. And I'm looking forward that we will do this in this session in the next couple of minutes with you together. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much for this great presentation. I think it was a very good entry in matter. And we're now going to hear from Vibeke and Anna from SUS Denmark.
Thank you very much. And thank you for inviting us for this this session, and thank you, Stefan, for introducing the topic. And we will provide some examples with our work with participatory, including inclusion and participation from vulnerable people in a vulnerable position. Our focus is that social transformation by including young people in which that young people should be included, and which initiatives should guide the areas in which they live their lives. So that's our starting point, and it's a prerequisite for them to be able to exercise their rights, as we have also discussed in this conference. And now our case is young people in risk of homelessness and with foster care background. But before getting into that, we would just, since probably not so many has heard of us before outside of Denmark, we would just briefly state who we are. We are a project and knowledge center. The employees come from different backgrounds, from social science, some with research background and some with more practical background. And but just putting up the way that we work, but saying that we are a non-profit independent organization having existed in 28 years. Our members are municipalities, municipal managers, unions representing street level bureaucrats broadly, and user organization also broadly. So usually the ones that may disagree across a negotiation table have supported us for 28 years. So that's sort of an effort we are proud of, and we develop methods and solutions dealing with complex social issues, and often in a way where we challenge the system so that we have been able to keep that position is somewhat an effort. And for us, we take as a point of departure that in order to, we need to involve and create lasting change for citizens in vulnerable position, and always in collaboration with the citizens and the stakeholders. Before we go into our own work, we will just briefly touch upon what's the trends in Denmark. We heard earlier this week that Denmark, as a Scandinavian country, also is a country where the focus is on the rights of the children. And there's been also reforms supporting that direction. But starting as point of that the municipalities are the prime decision-making authorities when it comes to vulnerable children and young people. And in May this year, there was a large national reform called Children First that's going to run for the next 3 years. And a broad coalition in the Danish Parliament have decided upon bettering the conditions for children in vulnerable position, where the families and the children should be assisted earlier, so preventing earlier and better, fewer shift and more stability in foster care, more rights for the children, better quality in foster care, and better quality in case presence and legal certainty, so the children know their rights, and assist transition from trial to adulthood. So that's just broadly the way that the national level sets the frame for the municipal level, and you could say that it's also been stated that it will be supported by a new law where from the age of 10, the children are granted an independent status. They have a right to say no to contact with biological parents, and stability is the focus. At the same time, we also see that the municipalities do not fulfill their obligations. It's a requirement that they include, they have a conversation with children before making decisions, and only 26% of the children are involved in these conversations. So there's definitely a problem with implementation. And when you ask the young people who have been placed in foster care, only 27 feel they have been included in the decision concerning where they should live. So there's definitely room for improvement. But besides from a large focus on including children in their own cases, we also from SU states that there's a room for including the children and the young people, not just in their own cases, but also as part of the collective process, which initiatives, which efforts should we make within this area. And they have a say due to having lived their lives as foster carers or as in a vulnerable position. And we need to include them in order to design better solutions for them. And Anna will tell more about some of the work we have done in that respect.
Thank you, Vibeke, and Stefan also for hitting it off in this section. I'm Anna from the Social Development Center, and as Vibeke said, I will tell you a little bit about our views and our methods and our experience in working with including experts by experience in our work and in our work in helping public sector servants in strengthening the systems that surround vulnerable people in vulnerable positions, and especially children and young people and families at risk. And also thank you to Marit and the DEPA team for having us here. We're very pleased to be invited into this and look forward to the discussion afterwards. As Vibeke said, there is in a Danish context, oh, now I did it wrong. Now I did it right. There is a growing tendency to focus on this individual level where you are supposed to be included in decisions that concern matters in your own life. And there's different initiatives trying to strengthen that ability in the structure and in the actual service delivered. But in our view and in our experience, especially with including young people from foster care backgrounds, we have been, there's been a growing awareness that more broadly there is a lack of focus on inviting experts by experience in more broadly in development and strengthening of those systems that are actually put in place to support and help them. This is sometimes called organizational user involvement. And throughout this, I will use the term user and people with lived experiences and experts by experience, meaning the same thing. And there has been over also the last decade or so, when you're talking strengthening of any kind of public service system, and growing support and acknowledge of the importance of uncovering tacit knowledge from a user perspective. And so also in the social sector and concerning families and children at risk. But the challenge is that this kind of user influence are often carried out on the premises of the professional effort who decide the framework and determine what is going to happen. And moreover, the knowledge uncovered is oftentimes carried onwards in the process by other people and not those exposed to the system solutions. They are seldom also included in defining the starting point of what we are going to talk about at all, and the questions to be asked in the process, and included in when we analyze and find patterns in the research uncovered. Also, sometimes when we see efforts where system representatives try to involve from a really positive and intention, you find situations where those involved are actually have an unequal and maybe even person-sensitive relation to the people that are involving them, if we're talking about representatives from municipalities or other areas of the support system. The people with experience or experts with experience background, they are rarely trained to contribute to a development process and unfold and engage in dialogue with system representatives. I know today in this session we have some that are, and we are of course looking forward to hear from your perspective how this is felt. But in the work that we do and a lot of the work that we see other places, involving people with lived experiences also remain to be a story from the future, a story from the reality or case stories, and they are not involved as real actors in the development processes. So therefore, it remains to be individual testimonies, and we are less likely to include users in developing their experiences into common knowledge products that can be brought into a broader dialogue and also turned into concrete proposals of what changes in practice are needed. So, and even less, we are unlikely to invite users into the process where we follow up with developing ideas and trying out new services and test prototypes of what is actually working. In our work, we see a social sector who actually really wants to, but they struggle, and their own agenda often stands in the way of a systematic curiosity towards and influence of the people with lived experiences. So in our view, we lose important knowledge that is key to social transformation and better outcomes. And we actually miss an opportunity to create access to participation and influence, both on an individual level, but also when we're talking about the cohesiveness of society. So what we have done at SUS is that we are experimenting with collective processes where we invite in people with experienced backgrounds to uncover knowledge from their perspective and invite them to take part in the process that unfolds from there. And I will tell you a little bit about that and the method that we developed concerning that and have been trying out. And these pictures are from one of the first collaborations we had with a major Danish foundation, where we invited in a group of 18 young people with foster care background. And we know that that the period where you come out of foster care is a very vulnerable period, and there's a high risk of homelessness, lack of unemployment, drop out of school, substance abuse, and so on. So the focus of this work was to uncover knowledge from their perspective and point to the most pressing issues to be solved if you are to come out of foster care as a capable young person and have an independent life. And this work was together with a thorough investigation of research in this area. This work was a strong knowledge base for an initiative called My Way Home that the Danish Foundation is heading now. And the focus is to develop new solutions that will actually support young people the way that they need to be, and so that they can come out of foster care with a better way towards their own home and their own independent life. So the steps that we are conducting and that we have been refining through this process and others to follow is actually quite straightforward. And I must say that we are not researchers. We are more of helpers to the social systems that surround people in need, and we draw on research. But this is not a research conducted, but it's a proposal for a method that we are refining, and that we hope to have a dialogue with you and a lot of other people in the future. So we prepare and invite in a group of experienced experts. We meet and work together on what is important in experience-based knowledge across the different situation. And then we invite in other types of knowledge from practice, research, and other places, and facilitate a dialogue and make collective decisions of what is important. And then in the end, we start to imagine together about desirable futures we would like to see. In our work, we build on 4 principles. We have to shift the balance of power. All processes starting with someone inviting someone else in are a little bit odd. But when we move the conversation from system issues to everyday issues, and leave time to prepare and to speak with one voice, we succeed in shifting power structures and thus the basis for real dialogue. Then secondly, we must move from narrative to knowledge. When we do that, we can make a much stronger knowledge foundation and move from that individual case and instead creating space for users to create knowledge. We do that when users share stories across their different situations and take part in finding patterns and themes. In this way, they become co-creators of knowledge that can stand in its own right and meet other types of knowledge. Then we move on and focus on actual co-creation with other types of knowledge. We feel that we need to stress, because the spaces for dialogue between different kinds of knowledge and where we can elevate knowledge from a user perspective to and in equal terms with other types of knowledge from research and practice, those spaces are, in our view, virtually non-existent today, also in a Nordic welfare context. So the last thing is that we need to create transparency. This is about clear facilitation. We have a role also, and we perceive knowledge as something that is created in the process, and therefore facilitation is not neutral. We are co-creators too, and that requires really transparency in the process. So to sum up, here are some of the points that I have touched upon and that we feel are key to trying to make this shift away from individual stories to collective knowledge products and co-creation of real new knowledge and ways forward together by people with experienced backgrounds and actors in the system, research actors, and so on. And we feel that when we move on to prioritizing and focusing, it's particularly useful also to bring in tools that can spur imagination and be able to point forward together. We have included some references to our work, and unfortunately, this is all in Danish, but very soon we hope that we will have some English texts to share with all you guys, and we hope to have a lot of dialogue about this in the future. So don't hesitate to reach out and contact us. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. That was very, very informative. And now we are going to hear from our other experts. So I'll let the floor to Louise.
Hello, my name is Louise Hetland, and I'm 20 years old. I work at Utekontakten in Bergen, where I use my experience to help others. I work in families and with the youth. When I meet the youth or the families, I often tell about my experience, but only if I think it's relevant for them. I use my experience to help others get through what they're going through, and they know that what I say is my own truth because we have a shared experience, or we know the same feeling. So many people come to me and tell me, "Oh, you have such a heartwarming story. You should use it every time you meet someone." But that's not what I do. I only tell my story if I think it's relevant for the other person. My story is how I came to where I am today, but for them, it's only a way to see it's possible for them to go on with their life too. So when I say I have experience with child protective services, or I have experience with mental health, we go deeper into it if they think it's relevant. At Utekontakten, where I've worked in about 1 year now, I meet many different people. Some of them don't even know my story or my experience yet because it haven't been relevant for how I should help them. But some others like to hear how I got through my problems, how I used the system to help me, how I am where I am today. So they can see that there's hope, there is a way, and we can work together and find their way to get through their life, and to just accept how life is, and accept the feelings, accept that this is me, and I'll get through it if I try, and accept getting help. Some of the people I've worked with have told me that it's easier to talk to me because they know I'm telling the truth, and they know I've been through some of the same stuff, and that we have some of the same experiences. Some like to talk to me because I'm young. I'm probably the youngest at my workplace. And some like to talk to me because I have tattoos, or I have piercings, or anything like that. But when we go deep into the conversations that we have, they always tell me that, okay, since you have experiences, they don't need to be the same as mine, but since you have it, it's so much easier to trust you and to be honest with you. I'm not scared for you to tell everyone else. I'm not scared that you're going to judge me or send me to some other person or give up on me, because I know you've been through some of the same stuff, and I want to be honest with you. I want you to tell me your story. I want you to be there and help me get through my problems. So I'm really, really happy with my work, and I think that I get just as much from helping them as they get from my help. And I believe that having experience and using that to help others, it's such a great way to both help others and to help yourself get through it yourself and accept the way it is. I think there's so much easier for some people to talk with people with experience because of the trust and the understanding between us. So I could also say that at my workplace, since I've started working there, the community is much more open. People are honest with each other, and we share so much of our own story or our own experiences, and we help each other to know how we should help others, and we share all our experiences so we can learn from them together, and so that everyone knows that even though we're different, we all have some experience, we all have felt some of these feelings, and that's a great way for us to understand each other and find the right help, find the right way to help each other. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, Luis. Now we will hear from Matilda and Leon, joining us from Zoom. Yeah.
Hello, and thank you so much for inviting us to this today. My name is Leon.
And my name is Matilda.
And we are pros at the Change Factory. And the Change Factory started in 2004, where it is a knowledge center. We do surveys with children all throughout the country based upon this idea that we have all these systems for children. We have schools, we have help systems, and we have the child protective services, but we need to hear from them what it's like, and also hear their advice, and because we need to know from them how to make them useful, because we want to help children, and then we've got to hear from them. And so the Change Factory contributes to Norway with this knowledge through those interviews with a lot of children. And sort of we pose this question: what does a state or an institute or a city, for example, really need to know from children, those whom it affects, in order to really say, okay, we really do have this knowledge now. How can we say we have that knowledge?
And that's a big question. Like, what is actually knowledge from children? And can grown-ups like invite or like choose a small group of children and ask them about something and then say that that is knowledge? Can we say that we know what schools in Norway feel like if we ask like 8 kids? And like, imagine if we did that to adults, like put together 6 adults in a group and showed them a plan or something, and to hear what they thought about it, and then said like, okay, now we've heard adults' opinion on this. Like, it would have been chaos, because 6 people isn't enough to say that you have knowledge from children or adults or people. So the Change Factory, when we do those surveys, or we talk to a lot of kids, a lot of places around the whole country, and often more than 1,000 kids if the survey is about school, and more than 100 if the survey is about children in care or mental health.
Yes, and also the thing that's interesting about all the answers that children give in those interviews is that it overlaps quite a bit with 4 processual rights that children have according to the Convention on the Rights of the Child, which is the best of the child. All actions that affect the child have to be for the best of that child, and the child has to express his or her opinions freely. And what does that really mean? And those descriptions in the general comments overlap incredibly much with the answers that children give in those interviews. And they say, well, it has to be safe. I have to feel safe in order to really express my opinions. So that's also a bit interesting to look at how can we really hear what children say and what they mean. And there's also the right of children have the right of information, like how can you really express your opinions on something if you don't have any information to know what you are talking about properly. And also the right to privacy, which is Article 16. And so before something I have said to an adult who's going to talk with me, I have to know before she can go on and tell somebody else. So those 4 rights is something that Norway actually hasn't properly taken into its laws. It did sort of, and a bit, like partially in 2003, but already then some people were saying, I'm a bit concerned, like these rights aren't properly incorporated into Norwegian laws. And so these systems haven't functioned in a way that takes care of these children's rights. And so when children in those systems are supposed to express their opinions, we have to just think about that. And in the future now, we are working with some jurists, some lawyers and people who know a lot about the law in order to describe how these rights function, because we can't have systems built without knowing really from within the hearts of children what they really think and what they need in order for those systems like school and mental health care to be useful. So that book is coming in English as well, so that the whole world can know how to really use those rights, because they are incredibly important. Because we need to hear children on a system level, a lot of children throughout the whole country, every kind of child, in order to really know what children as a whole, as a group, mean when something is going to be developed.
So when the Change Factory started a lot of years ago, they used this methodology that's called participatory learning in action. And a lot of you may have heard about that. Some of you talked about that earlier as well. And they started with participatory learning in action. And then the 2 first years, they worked together with children to find out like the right tools to make the methodology work in Norway. So when the Change Factory does surveys now, the tools that we use are actually made by children in Norway, around 200 children in 2 years, so that it would work in like with, so that you could find out what those kids actually meant, because it's not just to ask children. You can't just ask children. That's not the same thing as getting to know what children really mean. And a lot of the surveys are like it
done thoroughly. No.
Oh yeah, that too. It's like the interviews are done thoroughly because we need to know the most important things from children if Norway is going to use that knowledge. But also it does look like research a lot, but it isn't research in a sense, because the answers from the children are what we present to as the solution. We don't like tie it up to theories or anything like that. So it looks like research, and a lot of the ways of doing the interviews look like research, but in the end, we just call it knowledge from children, because that's what it is.
Yeah. And there are like two ways that we decide what to do interviews on and to do like research on. And Stefan was in on it earlier today, and it was really interesting to hear because we look at, well, through the interviews, we see what sort of comes up and up again, and maybe that's not the topic of this report, but okay, so this is important for children, and we have to talk with children like what's important about this topic, and maybe that's something we should do a report on, because we have to know, like in a democratic society, like you were talking about, what is important for the people we are doing this research with. Like, how can we not talk with them and cooperate with them when we are deciding what's important? Because I can like stand here all I want and say, well, this is something that's important, but do I really know from children that this is a change we need, or this is the state of like, are we talking about the right thing? Like truly, if we don't cooperate with children from the process of like planning a survey or planning those interviews, and what questions to ask even, we need to ask children from the very start. And then also in the Change Factory, we work with children. Well, we also work on those projects when those reports are being made, because a lot of adults can sort of interpret those questions, know those answers given, but that's not going to happen because we need those answers really from children.
So in the end of every like survey the Change Factory does, we ask the kids, do you want to become like a pro and present the answers from many children around all of Norway from those surveys. And then children are the ones who present that to students or professionals or a lot of politicians or also researchers and scientists. So like children actually stand in front of either those who are studying to become teachers, or those who already are teachers, or those who work in the Child Protective Service now, and tell them like not only their story, but also what many children say, because like some of you were talking about earlier, like storytelling isn't like what's a country gonna do with one child's story. And yes, that story is important, but we need to know from a lot of children. And that's what those kids in the Change Factory does.
Mm. So that's a very real question, like you said, how many children do we have to talk to, and how do we also have to talk to them in order for this to be proper like research or science or knowledge. And also in that science, we oftentimes get like the experiences of children, like this is the state right now, but do we also ask them, hey, what are your solutions? Do we ask children for solutions in research?
But we do, and that's kind of what knowledge is. It is the experiences, but it is also the solutions from the children that many children have said from many places in the country. And then another thing that's pretty important is that in the Change Factory, the children are also in the dialogues when adults or professionals or students or politicians ask questions to the knowledge, when they try to like challenge it or have questions about how do we do that, the kids are the ones who answer, because if adults were supposed to take over from there, then they would just guess, or they would guess wrong, or they wouldn't. Like kids can also stand in those dialogues, and that's important to know, because yeah, that's really what makes it like different from research, and also work like all the way through, that children are participating in this all the way through.
Yeah, so that's from us. Thank you so much. And just bring that on, like what do we really ask kids about when we do research, and how do we ask them? Do we ask them for advice? Because can adults run away with the experiences of children and then come up with the solutions? It's that allowed? And how many children's experiences to really base those solutions that adults can interpret. So ask children for the solutions as well. That's the research. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, and thank you all for these very insightful presentations. Before we open for the Q&A, I wanted to ask our speakers if you have comment or response to the other presentation you've heard so far.
Well, I just wanted to comment a little bit on what you guys said from Forandringsfabrikken. Thank you for a very good presentation. And I just had the idea when you were talking that you know, this with asking children what they feel and what their lives look like and what they think. Obviously, we think that is really, really important too. But in a way, I feel that we actually need to build that into any kind of systems for the that serves children or any kind of public system, so to say. But so what I'm hinting at is that in a way it's sad that we have to sit here to talk about this, because this really had to be the way that we were working all the time with all social issues in our society. So.
I have also a question to the Change Factory pros. I wasn't sure, what was your position towards what you are doing? Sometimes I had, I thought, okay, you are calling it research. And there were other sections of your presentations where I thought you make a distance between what you are doing and research. So could you please clarify for me your idea of what you are doing? Is it research or is it not research?
Well, it's not like science, and I thank you for the question, first of all. It's not research as in science, but also we don't take distance from it. Would you like to just fill in there?
Hi. Hi. It's a kind. There are a few things. Children, they are in a hurry, so we have to do it fast. So when we do a survey for the country, for example, we have to do it sometimes in half a year or a year, because there is a process going in Norway, and we need this knowledge fast out. So that's the first thing, because we would like to cooperate with the scientists. It would be easier in many ways to do the projects together, but then you scientists or researchers, you have rules that we cannot follow when we do this hurry survey work. So that's one important thing. If not, I think we could work together. And then at the end, the children, they point at us and they say, we want to present this, and you should be careful with the interpret what the answers. So that's the other challenge. So we do it then, like you said, only with the answers from the children, and not with all these things you do, you researchers, at the end. But that's no conflict. It's not about that. Okay.
Okay.
But
I would say what you're doing is research.
Yeah.
It's in the process, in the procedures, if it is research or not, and not in the positioning of the people who are doing it. And it's also not a matter of time. It's in the quality of the process in the end.
There are lots of researchers in Norway. We have talked together about this, and they also say something like you say now, that this is so parallel thing. So, but we are a bit humble to call it research. So we are a bit afraid that this will be a big discussion if Change Factory is doing research things. But I think we hear it as an advice to go also to maybe to connect it more to research again. Thank you. We call you.
I'm here.
Isn't just, I think that the positive thing is that we open up for the knowledge base, also that we could get it into research, that the way that we include children and young people's knowledge from their basis and not the system's basis. That's really the positive way forward, and getting researchers involved in that the knowledge processes also meets the standards and criteria of a legitimate and validated way to collect data and interpret data, and opening up for exactly what we have done and also what you're doing at the Forandringsfabrik, that you need to be part of the analyze as well. You need to be part of interpreting the knowledge that we gather from interviews or from workshops or from the surveys, so that it's not adults, researchers, or the system that sort of interpret it in a way that we think it should be interpreted. It's very important that you are included as well. And I hope that researchers will go into that field and help us to work with it, so that we can ensure that we meet the standards of quality, so that the politicians and those having decision-making power also will accept this knowledge.
That would be really cool. It would be like a knowledge revolution if it happened.
I just wanted to clarify or support that you were saying something about you have to ask many children, and of course you have to pay attention to what are the trends, what are the meaning of many. But just in our view and in our work, it can also, if you pay close attention to how you are curating the people that you gather in the room, you can also do clever involvement with a small group. That's what we are trying to do in many cases. And so this is just to say there's different methodological standpoints that you can take, and you have to use the method that are giving the best result in whatever you're trying to achieve. And also that's why we need the researchers to help, find knowledge of what is the best way forward when this is what we're curious about, this is what we're trying to unfold. And we have some ideas to do it this way. How does that correspond with legitimate research methods?
I think what you're saying is really right in a way, but when we sort of have to find new knowledge, that's when we go in with these big numbers of children, like several hundreds, if not over 1,000 kids. But then to really go in depth, like you say, they're going with smaller groups is very useful also to find those really in-depth answers. But from the start, in order to find new knowledge, we really want to go to big groups.
And in order to call it like the main findings of this survey, like we can't say that this is like a main finding if we've asked 7 kids, because then that would be 5 kids' knowledge, and that's not really we just believe that if Norway is going to use that knowledge, then we need it from more.
To change direction of Norway, because we found out in the beginning of the Change Factory that when we traveled around Norway and asked children, there were some very, or not the exactly same things, but some of these findings were so parallel in all parts of the country, and it was I was really scared to know that Norway doesn't know this. And they said, okay, you can ask children in care all over Norway and you'll get a lot of different answers. And then we find, yes, in some subject, yes, but in some, they're exactly the same. For example, in childcare institutions. So then we started this knowledge-centered thinking, and we started to think that we have to find the main findings from children, and then we present these main findings as main findings, and then we can go in depth. But that was very important, because if not, Norway can find findings from different things, but doesn't know. And Norway really has no system for gathering this knowledge from children. So we are really challenging the politicians in Norway now. There is a new parliament coming up, and they will really be challenged with this.
Yes, because in all public documents and guidelines for systems for children, they need knowledge from a lot of children, because those guidelines are going to affect so many children throughout the whole country. There are 1 million children in Norway, and so we need to know from as many children as possible in order to make those guidelines.
And the children, they
proper.
started to ask, who made these guidelines? Why are they wrong? Why are they not good for children? What is the goal with that? And that is where it started. So we started to find these main things to challenge really in the departments. And then we'll see what the departments will do the next years.
Yeah. But definitely for each their own use.
Yeah, I think we have our first question from the audience.
Hi everyone, good to see you all in Oslo. Nice to see you, Marit, as well. Stefan and Vibeke and Anna and also Louise that I've had to leave. It was great presentation, so thank you so much for that. I think I have one or perhaps two questions. And I think that what you have all spoken about, including Louise, is that this is something about this imbalance in power and also ability to participate. So you touched upon that, Stefan, in your presentation, and you have it as one of your principles that you need to balance the power. And also it was talked briefly about how there was, in some ways, how you can speak with children in different ways. So I wanted you to expand a bit on that, how to actually create this kind of equality in power, and how also to make up for that there are differences between people, which there are, both in resources and knowledge and et cetera, et cetera. So that would be the one. And the second one I was wondering about, and I think that Louisa put it very clearly, and they said, sometimes you like to speak with someone which is young. And I was just kind of wondering if you can expand a little bit on how to create this trust between people, because some of these topics are quite sensitive. So there are something about getting that out in a good way. So that was my questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Very good question. I don't know who want to go first.
I can say something first. I can speak from a very concrete perspective of what we're actually doing with young people that we've been working together with. And concerning the power issue, what we find is very useful is to have this space where the young people with the experienced backgrounds, they have a time and focus to prepare before they meet system representatives. So they can speak with one voice in some aspects and they can support each other. And then also when you facilitate the meeting of different kinds of knowledge, you have to be very specific and very thoroughly need to pay attention that the people or the knowledge from a user perspective has to have equal, be equally valid. And to do that, sometimes you need to put that first. So what we do is that we maybe have some kind of exhibition or of stories, maybe anonymous stories and pictures and quotes on what it is like from a user perspective. And we ask system representatives to dive into that and to actually maybe walk around in silence, maybe just reflect, write down on a piece of paper. So we always
take the starting point from that type of knowledge when we facilitate processes where you're going to have a dialogue about what is wrong, what do we need to change. So that is one thing. And yeah, maybe what was the other question now? I forgot. Mari?
I could.
How to win trust.
Oh, trust. Yeah, sorry. That's really, really important. And you have to be very aware of what your role as a facilitator is, because that's what we are when we do that type of work. And there's also something about the physical place that you are. It has to be in a place that does not represent the system. So we have to invite young people to, maybe even homes, maybe a neutral place, and come to, so it can be on their terms, and then build the trust in the group, and also have them to build trust together. So also, about the power, just having them by themselves and build the trust and the way that you can go forward in the process with them, and let them decide what should be the ground rules of this process. That's our practical advices for that.
And just to supplement on that, the way that we work with smaller groups, then we create those trust and make sure to adjust the imbalance of power is also sort of to, on their terms, and not all of them, but some of them would like as pros to stand forward and talk to system representatives, and have become very active in different associations afterwards. They've been through the process, but it's on their terms, and it's not something that we force them in any way to do. And what we then so taking from a small group where you could develop, or a small group with between 20 and 30 young people, then going into that, they pointed in one example, they pointed out 4 areas that they thought needed to be changed, and then working on with municipalities locally, including their young citizens, and trying to create solutions. So not just letting them be heard, but also which solutions should we try out. And right now we're working on a new project where we involve foster care institutions, up to, I think, between 20 and 30 institutions in Denmark. And we include the Association of Foster Care Children, where we are going to hire them in zoos, and they are going to dive into the institutions together with us and examine what should be changed in order for us to create a better transition from childhood to adolescence, when you are to take care of yourself from you are between 18 and 21. So that's just one example of where we take the knowledge and also include them in the solutions that probably not the right solutions from the start, but the process of testing those solutions and adjusting them, both from the Association of Foster Care Children, but also together with the foster care children living at the institution. And the idea is that the trust and honesty, as it was also touched upon by Louise, will be created due to we come together with the Foster Care Association.
Well, I could follow on from that. When it is about winning trust, it's central that you are honest. Honest towards the people you want to work with, also with respect to your own interests and your own goals with a research project, and why it is important to you to cooperate with the other people, and what may be the rules, and what they can expect and what they not can expect. So being honest about this, and also about bringing out a transparency about which role applies to who, and who has what sorts of also decision-making powers towards which issues. This is very important. And this is also what I think is the extending of democratic principles to research. So it is not requirement that everybody has the same decision-making powers towards all issues under decision, but it has to be clear who has what sorts of power, who can contribute to the building of the ideas, and who make the decisions in the end, for example. So this is something that gives safety and transparency. It is not, the power does not disappear by good intentions, and that there is power, and power plays a role in the group of the researchers, in the group of the external researchers, and between those groups. So this is much more complex, and because it is complex, there are no simple rules to deal with it. But you must be sensitive for what's going on, also in terms of power games in all sorts of activities and groups.
It's really interesting to hear what all of you are saying, and if we can get a word in at the end, we would just like to also say it's really interesting when talking about power and knowledge. How do adults really need to know from children? Because children have had the right to sort of be part of the process, or they are sort of allowed to be part of the process. Yeah. It's the way that we talk about it oftentimes. But shouldn't it sort of be turned around entirely, and we should start saying everywhere that adults have a duty to include children, instead of children having the right or being allowed to being included, but it should be more so a duty to include them? Because is it necessary? Like, how do we really think about it? Do we think it's necessary and needed to hear from children? And then we got to start that discussion of how we think about it and how we include children.
Because the thing is, with like difference in power and like power equality, even that will never, like children will never be a part of that, because there is such a far way to go until it is equal, when adults have every right to decide and children don't really have anything. And we talk about that children are allowed to say their opinion, but like from kids we need to turn that around if it's ever going to be equal, because there are a lot of things you can do to get it more equal. But we have to flip a lot of minds to become equal, like so that children feel like they are included equally. And it is possible. And we meet politicians, and they are, it sounds kind of stupid, but like they are as humble to meet us because they know that they need our knowledge. And that's kind of where, like, the people who decide in Norway, politicians are some of them, but also the leaders in the big departments, they need to show and they need to say that they need knowledge from children if it's going to feel equal. And also if it's, because it's not that easy to be a child trying to get adults to say that they need knowledge from children. And we've met a lot of adults who we haven't felt that with. And then it's not really that easy to continue meeting adults after, or like until they kind of turn around and understand that, oh, I decide like the biggest things for children in Norway. I need that knowledge.
I think it's a really good point in turning it around to it's a duty to include children, because otherwise we just keep making the wrong decisions and and making the wrong solutions that are not targeted enough into what the needs of the children and young people are. So in order for society at all, it would be much better that we start making decisions and create solutions based on your say.
And also it would cost a lot less money.
Yes,
Because when politicians decide everything that they decide today, they have no clue if that's going to be good for children or bad for children. And a lot of the things that they decide are not entirely good. And that means we're spending a lot of money on deciding things that don't even work for kids.
I think we have a question from our online audience. I'm not sure I can't read it well.
Espen,
Okay, so there is a question from Espen. It says, thank you for a very interesting discussion. I have a question about the safety and integrity of children who opt to participate in the research regarding child protection systems. How do you ensure that children at risk are able to participate on their own terms and avoid the very real possibility of re-traumatization that might come with sharing personal experiences?
It's a very good question. And if I should say something, it's something we've discussed a lot at SUS, how we're going to go about this. And one thing is, of course, to establish some ground rules about it is totally up to young people what they're sharing with whom and when. But then also, if we're talking about very delicate matters, to have some kind of support system in place and access to people who can help them afterwards if needed. And as you said, Stefan, also to be open and to be what are the goals with this, and you do not need to spill out your whole life. This is not the goal with this. We need to see, have small bits of parts of your story that can help us together to work towards point forward to new solutions. That's the type of work we do, and we're not there to actually help them, the actual children or young people in the room. It can be a side effect and that they are actually very empowered from this kind of work, but also that they can be in a more vulnerable position afterwards. And in both, and we have to be ready for both directions.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
No, you.
We would just like to ask the question, not to you in the panel, but sort of back at Espen, or in general, what knowledge do we really have to ask or think that it is harmful for children to share experiences and advice? Like, do you really have any knowledge that says that? Just in general, based on what we have found, is that, like you were already talking about, was it Vibeke? Is that it helps to talk about it and to give advice, because you turn those experiences into something, you turn it into something productive and something that makes a change, a difference.
And when you make sure that the way you ask for their experiences and their advices, when that feels safe and when that is built with when kids have made that mythology, then it isn't harmful. And some may have, like, the feelings might come back, but that's not re-traumatization. That's probably not how you say it, but it's just like some kids have explained that that's what they needed to like move on with their life. It's like treatment basically. And for me, that's the best treatment that I've got. Like nothing else has helped, but here I can do something good with all the good experiences and the bad experiences. And that's for most of people or most of kids, that is more good than bad. And I've gone to a lot of psychologists and a lot of different treatment, but nothing is has helped other than using it to change Norway and help other kids. And a lot of children feel like that is there is nothing like that feeling when you get to help the people coming after you.
And also stressing that it is a collective process.
Mhm.
When we bring young people together, they can support each other and they can help each other and they can, be there for each other, because they can, it's like a mirror, and they can say, oh, I've tried that also. And then it's not so hard to share. And it's actually also our experience, precisely what you say, that it actually sometimes helps. So thank you for clarifying that.
Yeah. Stefan, did you want to? No, I don't know if we have any more questions from the audience. Otherwise, I would have a brief question for our panelists. We talked a lot about how to include and how to make sure that the answer we get are representative enough. And I would ask you, how can we do this work that you're all doing with children that are especially marginalized, either because they're very young or maybe because they are not in the system, maybe like illegal migrant children or also disabled children? Like if you have some reflection on that just before we have to leave the stage. I don't know who wants to start. Stefan?
Well, this is very big expectations and a very, very big task. And I have no proper answers. There are examples of including, for example, refugee kids, also illegal, so-called illegal refugee kids into research. But this is not often practiced, and there are not many experiences with it. It can be done, and basically, it needs the same requirements we have already talked about. So it's all about winning trust, and also combining, perhaps engaging with useful assistance or support or help. And if you don't success in building up a motivation for these young people, you will fail.
Thank you. I think we can just squeeze in a question from our audience on Zoom.
Yes, so there's a question: how is the indigenous view of the child or young person whose being is intertwined with that of their families and wider family group taken into consideration in this discussion, which focuses on the child or young person as an individual?
Who's wishing to go on this one?
Yeah, if we should start out, often with the ones we worked with and in the work we present here, typically has the issue of leaving a foster care institution, a foster care family, and then the system leaves them alone. And what they have is their biological family that they fall back to, and to all the both positive, but also there's a reason why they were put in foster care, but also dysfunctionalities in the family, and they don't get any help. So I think it's an important question in our coming work with creating the networks for the young people, that we also address their biological family and that we include them in the work. And we work with young children or in other parts of our work, and children from 0 to 3 years old, and that's the family as a unit that we address in those instances. So it's not that we have left the families out, but it is very problematic when we talk about it with children with foster care background. And in particular when they are turning 18 and have to stand on their own 2 feet. If we just look upon my own children and all the help they have been given, and the children that I've met in our projects that don't have any support, I think my children will have fallen through as well and wouldn't be able to cope. So we need to both address the families, but also address that they need extra support from society systems, but also an obligation from those who have taken care of them during their childhood, that they don't just leave them.
I'm not sure I quite understand the question thoroughly, but I think that it's about a young child and a young adult, and especially in some cultural settings, is very loyal to the family and the parents in some aspects, when especially if they are in the room, if we are together with families and so on. And then when you take young people out of their family setting, you can have another type of conversation. But it's just to say that this is an issue that we need to keep talking about, and we need to ask children and young people about how do we go about this when there is delicate issues that might be hard to share. So it's good to raise these questions, but as Stefan said, there's not good answers to all the questions. We are on a road here where we have to learn from each other and find good ways.
So the way I understand the question, it's a very good question, but you can address this question to all sorts of social research at all, because yes, we are interviewing individuals, but what we often try to bring into the data is the intertwinedness with others, and all human beings are in a way independent from other human beings. This is not a special thing that applies only to children. It's in the end, it's a question of the right methods and the right way to practice the right methods.
Yeah, that's very true. And I don't know if Leon, you just want to add a brief word before we unfortunately have to close this session.
We're not completely sure that we understood the question, but if we understood it correctly, it's like, no, can somebody explain the question just in one sentence?
I think the second question went more on how do you both respect the ethnic and familial background of the child, and at the same time maybe dissociate him or her if he wants to. I think that was on this line.
We don't. What's important for the child is what's important, and we don't really talk about what's not the topic. Yeah.
I think that's a
good answer.
That's a good answer.
And on this, I would like to thank you all for this great session. Also, thank you to the audience and the DIPA Center and Law Transform who organized this event. Thank you very much.